Hello, Mr. Shaw.
Oh, yeah, hi.
My name's Chari Kelly.
Hi, Doug Pullen. How are you?
Hello. I'm here to just talk a little bit about the possession of marijuana case with Angela Austin that's set on the pretrial
Okay.
docket today.
Okay, hang on for a sec. Let's see, here's my pretrial box. What's her name again?
Angela Austin.
Okay.
I just wanted to see if we can talk a little bit about this before pretrial, maybe save some time.
Sure. I see from the file that there's not a recommendation written in here. Do you want me to go ahead and give you a recommendation?
Well, I'd actually like to talk about that first a little bit. Angela is a student at the University of Texas. She's never had a prior conviction. She's never been in any trouble. She's a sophomore. She's just trying to get through school. She was arrested for possession of marijuana, and in this case, you know, it feels like she's a kid who's keeping her nose clean, and we're just trying to help her get back on track.
Okay, let me see. Well, I don't normally take marijuana cases too seriously, but I do take them seriously when somebody is smoking marijuana while they're driving a car. I mean, to me, this tantamount to a DWI.
Well, sir, we feel like there's potentially a suppression problem in this case, suppression problem of evidence. I don't want to get too in detail about it, but I feel like you should know about it.
Okay, hang on. I don't understand. He's driving down the street, he sees her smoking a joint in plain view. He stops the car, smells the odor of marijuana. It looks like, searches a car. It looks like a good stop and search and arrest to me, so.
Well, basically, some aspects of the stop are what are a little unclear. I mean, to be honest, I've gone through my entire stop and search argument before and let the cat out of the bag, and I prefer not to go through every detail of the argument, but we feel like Judge Triana may grant this suppression motion based on the fact that...
What is it that you want?
Well, basically, we're hoping deferred disposition for a Class C drug paraphernalia charge.
I'm not going to give somebody who's driving down the street smoking marijuana a deferred disposition on a Class C. I'm willing to give her a really light deferred adjudication with the only thing, would you rather pay, what's her financial situation? Would you rather pay a fine or do community service?
Well, this is a student, not a lot of money, but honestly, my client would prefer a situation in which she's not subjected to, if we can keep this as low as possible so she can get on with the rest of her life. Since she's 19 years old, you know, there's no pattern here.
Okay, I'll tell you what, if she'll do CES, go get evaluated and do whatever counseling they recommend, if she does CES up front, and I guess I also wanted to do 20 hours of CSR, if she'll do that, then I'll reduce this to a PDP with a $500 fine.
A PDP?
Yeah, possession of drug paraphernalia with a $500 fine plus costs. Okay. Let me just say, if you want to have the pretrial hearing today, I'm going to need to get my officer down here, so could you go check with your client and let me know pretty quickly whether she wants to go ahead and do this or whether you want to go ahead and have the pretrial today?
I believe, speaking with my client beforehand, that she would prefer the PDP with the $500 fine.
Okay.
Okay. Obviously verify with her, but...
Okay, could you just verify with her and get back with me?
Yes, she wants the PDP.
Okay, that's fine. Then go ahead and just, why don't you set it on the plea docket from a while from now and have her go ahead and do this stuff and just bring the documentation that she's completed CES and the 20 CSR, and then I'll fill out the reduction paperwork and she can go down to JB5 and plead her for the PDP and pay the fine and the court costs. And bring me the paperwork, and I'll dismiss this case, okay? Nice
Thank you.
meeting you. Okay. Bye.
I commend you on your very honorable act.
How you doing?
How you doing, Doug?
Yeah, I'm Doug Pullen.
Ali Hasibi.
Ali, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm here to see about Angela Austin.
Okay. What docket is she on, sir?
We're on pretrial today. In about, I think, 20 minutes, the judge's going to be ready to hear us, or at least start plugging away at the one set today. I wanted to just briefly talk to you about it and see if, I kind of got a special situation here. I wanted to see if there's anything you can do for this girl to help her out, and I'll tell you the story. She first came to me. She's got a possession of marijuana, as you can see. She was pulled over on Guadalupe by Officer Mike Sheffield. When she first came to me, I got the facts of the case. I got the police report, and I got a little bit excited about the case because that Woods case that came out in '97 that made reasonable suspicion even more vague for us all. This case kind of fell into that gray line, and I almost thought it would be a little fun to try to get the marijuana suppressed because it's in the gray line, and in my opinion, it falls on the defense's side of the gray line. I got to know this girl, though, better and better, and I met her father. He's the one that hired me. She's a UT law student. She's 19 years old. She's got a scot-free, clean record before this incident, and I got rid of my hopes of trying to clarify that gray line, and I think my goal number one is to just help this girl right now, because I mean she's studying biology. She wants to be a doctor. She's got all these hopes, and she's been screwing up lately a little bit. And her dad, with my help and hopefully yours, we're going to try to get her back on track. And
Has she got like a drug problem that we need to be concerned with?
I don't think she's got a drug problem. She's away from home for the first time. She's always been under the shelter of her parents, and she's feeling like she's free and she can test the waters a little bit.
Crazy in her sophomore year.
But this incident has scared her to death.
Let me see what we got on the PC here.
Yeah.
Possession of marijuana, Angela Austin, Sheffield, driving southbound. He sees her smoking a joint in plain view. And he smells the weed after he stops her. He finds the weed. 19 grams, man. I thought, I don't know. I mean, this isn't just a gram, it's not just a joint of marijuana. 19 grams is 3/4 of an ounce of weed.
It's a good-sized bag, yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another thing that concerns me, Ollie, is that she's driving a car, smoking a joint, driving the car down the street. That's kind of not too cool in my book,
I know, Doug, and believe me, it's stupid. It is ignorant, especially on Guadalupe and the drag and the broad
Well, what do you
daylight.
want, man?
I just want to help this girl get back on her feet, and she, like I said, she's scared to death right now. She doesn't.
Well, I don't want to take her driver's license or nothing like that. I don't think that, I'd be recommended to final with probation on it. I could do deferred adjudication on it.
That's going to stay on her record, though, huh?
Well, I mean, if she won't have a conviction record.
Yeah. My goal is to just try to keep her record clean, make her do community service hours, make her understand her wrongs as much as you can, but her
Is she
number
willing to
goal.
do some community service and stuff?
Yeah, let me-
Has she done any counseling?
She'd be happy to. She hadn't done any yet.
She hadn't registered for SACA or what is it, CES now, whatever the heck they call it, Counseling and Education
We're on the
Service?
tape. Yes, she has actually.
All right,
and she's gonna, her father's making her do that. She's gonna try to address her problems if she
I
has
think
any.
she's taking this pretty serious then.
Yeah, she's really taking.
All right, I'll tell you what, we could do a 6-month deferred disposition with 40 hours of community service, $200 fine, court costs, if she does the CES up front, okay? She's got to do CES up front, and she needs to provide a negative urinalysis today.
You got it.
Okay, go get it off the docket, and like I said, do whatever you want, float it to whatever docket you want, but just make sure that she finishes the community, the counseling and education services. She can do the 40 hours of community service during the deferral period.
Okay.
But just take her over to Laney, the probation officer, and Laney will take her over to the bathroom, and we'll get the negative UA.
Thanks for your help, Doc.
Okay, take care. There's Angela right there, Ollie. Go talk to Angela. Doesn't matter, whichever one you want. Just talk to her. I think both of them understand what's going on.
I'm ready to be.
Come and talk to me, I'm Angela. Have a seat.
I think I'm already sensing what's about to happen.
Yeah. You talked to the prosecutor?
Yes, I did. Prosecutor's going to give time for this position.
I'm your client. I'm Angela.
Oh, yeah, Angela, can you do some community service hours? We can keep this on the record.
Oh, sure, super. No problem at all. How many?
40.
No, not a problem. How long do I have to do it?
6 months.
6 months.
No, I can do that.
Good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine, it's
Not a problem, Dad, you're good.
Did I miss anything? Your analysis today.
I'm sorry, what?
Your analysis today. Can you repeat it?
Why?
Is there a problem?
Why don't know? Why do they want me to?
Well, just because I told them what you did, what we were talking about, and that officer wasn't that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I'm not smoking nearly as much as I was before.
You are supposed to. You're not
Not very much.
You're not going to be able to do your analysis.
How long does it stay in the system?
I'm not sure.
I haven't, let me think, what's today's, it was, I think the last time I smoked was a week ago Friday. It was pretty far back.
I don't know.
Okay.
He called the doctor. He said it ain't coming out. Come on back and deal with me.
Go back.
Did you get off the docket?
Well, I got a problem, Doug. I talked to her, and she doesn't want to give a urine analysis test. She said she
doesn't want to
a couple
give
of
one.
drags off a
I
joint
got-
with her
you don't
boyfriend
have
like
to
a
tell
week
me much
ago.
more. I understand. She's not as ready as we thought.
Well, she's working on it. I thought she was ready. Her dad was ready. Again, the repercussions from what she just admitted to me based on the pressure I just put on her is
Man,
going to be
what do you want to
serious.
do? I was ready to give her a break, but I thought she was taking this crap serious.
Let's give her a few weeks and get her first year analysis then, and from then on throughout the 6 months, do it periodically, randomly if you want.
You're off the hook. I just want to see how you're going to deal with it. First of all, I don't think you realized what was happening.
I now call cause number 472-397, State of Texas versus Angela Austin. This case is now called for pretrial. Is the state ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor, we're ready. On the motion to suppress, we'd like to call Officer Mike Sheffield.
Officer Sheffield, would you please step up here and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony given this cause will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated.
Officer, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Michael Sheffield.
And you're an officer in the Austin Police Department,
Yes, sir, that's correct.
and you've been doing that for how long?
6 years now.
6 years. And those 6 years, do they include the training time that you put in to become an officer?
Yes, sir, that does include cadet school.
How long was cadet school?
6 weeks.
On January 6th of this year, you were on patrol, were you not?
Yes, sir, I was.
And as part of your patrol, you found yourself on the 1500 block of Guadalupe at one point during the day.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And were you on routine patrol?
I was, yes, sir.
And you were in your patrol unit at the time of the incident in question?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And the 1500 block of Guadalupe, that's a street that goes by the University of Texas, is it not?
Not the 1500 block, no, sir.
Okay, and that portion is not part of the University of Texas?
I wouldn't consider the 1500 block. There are parts of Guadalupe that go into the university area, starting with 19th Street up to about 29th Street.
This part of the 1500 block of Guadalupe, that is regularly patrolled by the Austin Police Department?
Yes, sir.
And there's restaurants on the road?
Yes, sir, there is.
There's shops?
There are, sir.
Gas stations even?
Yes, sir.
And you wouldn't say it's necessarily a high-crime area, would you?
Well, I could.
Well, I wasn't asking if you could or not, Officer Sheffield. It's not a high-crime area. After all, there's shops and restaurants, and it's a high-travel area.
It's a high-traveled area, but there has been some crime around that area.
But some crime doesn't necessarily equal high crime, does it?
Well, I guess that just depends on...
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is being non-responsive. Let me repeat the question, Officer Sheffield.
Your Honor, if he could give the witness a chance to respond to the question.
I'm going to let, you asked the question, I'm going to give the witness a chance to answer it. Go ahead.
It just depends on your definition of high crime, sir.
On the 1500 block of Guadalupe, you were behind Ms. Austin's car.
Yes, sir, I was. Well,
And that-
I was on the side of it, actually.
Us to the side and a little bit behind.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it was a black Camaro two-door?
Yes, sir, it was black Camaro two-door.
And you were a little bit, like you said, to the left and behind, in a lane just to the left of Ms. Austin, at the start.
Not at the start, at the finish. When, at the red light, we were like that.
Before that, you were not behind her?
No, sir, we were both coming up to a stop on 15th and Guadalupe, and she entered my peripheral vision as we came to a stop, and then when we were stopped, I was watching her from behind and the side.
In fact, she was the first car in the right lane at the red light,
Yes, sir, that's correct.
and you were the second car in the left lane, just to her left.
Yes, sir.
At that red light.
That's correct, sir.
This black Camaro of Ms. Austin's, it had tinted windows, right?
I believe it did, yes, sir.
And the windows were rolled up at that time.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You saw Ms. Austin smoking what looked like to you at the time to be a hand-rolled cigarette.
A hand-rolled marijuana cigarette, yes, sir.
You knew at that time it was a marijuana cigarette, officer?
I suspected it was. I wasn't conclusive, but I pretty well thought it was.
Okay. You observed Ms. Austin holding this cigarette,
Yes, sir, I did.
and she was holding it between her index finger and her thumb.
Yes, sir.
And just before that, she was holding it between her index finger and her middle finger.
I don't remember that, sir.
Oh, you weren't there to see that?
No, sir.
Okay. She was holding the cigarette between her thumb and her index finger when you saw her take a drag off of the cigarette.
Yes, sir, I did.
And you described the drag in your report to be a long drag.
That's correct, sir.
And the cigarette was more or less an inch long.
That's about how long it was, yeah.
You didn't see any paraphernalia at the time, such as a roach clip or anything like that that's common in drug use.
That's correct, sir, I did not.
Just her fingers
Yes, sir.
and the cigarette.
Yes, sir.
And in your car, in your patrol unit, when you were to the left and she was in the right lane, you couldn't smell any odors at that time, could you?
No, sir.
Of any kind?
Well, in my car, but that's about it.
Okay.
Police cars don't smell that great.
You, after the red light, after it turned green, of course, and the cars began to proceed, yours and hers included, you got behind Ms. Austin's black Camaro,
That's correct, sir.
and you pulled the Camaro over.
Yes, sir, I did.
And you approached the driver's side of the Camaro,
I did?
and you asked Ms. Austin to roll down the window.
Yes, sir.
And you asked for identification.
Yes, sir.
You identified Ms. Austin.
That's correct, sir.
And then you asked identification from the passenger,
Yes, sir, I did.
and you identified the passenger.
Yes, sir.
And you asked them to exit the car, is that right?
I did, yes, sir.
Okay. And they moved to the back of the car.
Yes, sir, they did.
That's where you placed them, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay? And you went back to the black Camaro.
Yes, sir.
The door was open at the time.
That's right, sir.
And you searched the interior of that car.
Yes, sir, I did.
And you found a bag of a green leafy substance.
Yes, sir.
And in your opinion at the time, you thought the bag was marijuana.
Yes, sir.
But once you found the bag, you came back toward the rear of the car where the two were standing, Ms. Austin and the passenger,
Yes, sir.
and you told them what you'd found.
Yes, sir, I did.
And at that time, Ms. Austin made some statements to you, didn't she?
Yes, sir.
Officer Sheffield, this is almost a silly question, but you've heard of cigarettes, regular tobacco cigarettes, of course.
Yes, sir.
Marlboro Lights, Camels, whatever.
You bet.
And many people smoke regular tobacco cigarettes daily, although maybe they shouldn't, but they do.
Many people do. Yes, sir.
Tobacco cigarettes, some of those people smoke hand-rolled tobacco cigarettes.
Some do.
And that's something that's available in tobacco stores and other stores.
Yes, sir, it's available.
And those people that roll these hand-rolled tobacco cigarettes, they hand-roll them in paper made for that purpose.
That's correct, sir.
That paper's a lot of times referred to as zigzags, right? That's the name of them.
Well, rolling papers, Zigzag is a brand of them.
Is a
Yes, sir.
brand, right. And people smoking these cigarettes often smoke them with their thumb and index finger, don't they?
I don't know about often, but I've seen some.
They do, some do.
Some do.
And they smoke them with their index finger and their middle finger.
Yes, sir.
And those cigarettes can easily get down to an inch long and still be smokable.
They can be smokable at an inch long.
After all, there's no filter on those cigarettes. The tobacco goes all the way to the end.
Not on a hand-rolled cigarette, that's correct.
Right. And some people, especially ones that have maybe been smoking for a number of years, take longer drags off of cigarettes than maybe some others.
I'd say that not everybody inhales the same amount of time.
It's not impossible to see somebody taking a long drag off of a tobacco hand-rolled cigarette, is it?
I wouldn't say it's impossible.
Okay. These rolling papers or zigzags that we talked about just a minute ago, those are the same exact kinds of papers that are used to roll and later on smoke marijuana cigarettes, aren't they?
Yes, sir, they are.
In fact, being the same paper, marijuana cigarettes and hand-rolled tobacco cigarettes are virtually identical in appearance.
No, sir, marijuana is usually a little bit more lumpy and has sometimes not been refined to the degree that tobacco is, and so most marijuana cigarettes appear a little bit more wrinkly than tobacco cigarettes.
Officer, would you say you were more than 15 feet away from Ms. Austin when you were in your patrol unit and you saw her smoking cigarettes in her car?
I wouldn't say I was more than 15 feet, no, sir.
You were less than 15 feet?
About 6 to 8 feet apart.
Okay, and from there you can detect lumps on cigarettes?
I could tell it wasn't, as uniform as a store-bought manufactured cigarette.
And you testified earlier that the windows were up, rolled
Yes,
up.
sir.
And those windows were tinted?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. No, pass the witness, Your Honor.
Hello, Sheriff. Sheriff, you said that you were on the force for 6 years. Has all that been in Travis County?
Well, it's been at Austin Police Department within Travis County.
And during your experience as a police officer, have you ever made any drug-related arrests besides the case in question today?
Yes, ma'am.
About how many drug arrests would you say that you make in a week?
I'd say routinely about at least one. It's got something to do with some sort of drug.
And in your training, you mentioned the academy before. During your training, did you have any drug training then?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I had drug training in cadet school and in Round Rock later.
Did you learn how to identify certain drugs?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading questions.
And overrule the objection.
Did you learn how to identify certain drugs?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you learn typical ways in which those drugs are used?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you learn to identify suspects using those drugs?
Well, it's kind of a hard question to ask. I mean,
To clarify-
lots of people use drugs.
To clarify typical signs of somebody using crack cocaine or typical signs of someone smoking a marijuana cigarette, for example.
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Now, based on all of this experience in cadet school as well as your experience on the job, are you familiar with what marijuana looks like?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And what does marijuana look like?
Well, it has different types of appearances. It can be anything from a very green leafy substance, some people call it homegrown, that really looks like the typical five-fingered leaf, if you will, except dried up. That's low-quality marijuana, up to sinsemilla, bud type of marijuana that's grown commercially in South America and in Mexico.
Now, based on your experience, are you familiar with what marijuana smells like?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And are you familiar with the way, or what is the most common way for people to use marijuana?
It's usually by smoking it in a joint, marijuana cigarette.
Could you please describe what a joint is?
Yes, ma'am, it's a self-rolled marijuana cigarette.
And could you describe the appearance of a joint?
Well, I guess I could, it's kind of like a cigarette. It's round for the most part. I mean, it depends on the person that's rolling it, really. But usually it's a little bit more lumpy than tobacco. It's not as refined.
About how long is a marijuana cigarette?
Well, as long as the paper that's manufactured. I mean,
Could you please compare a marijuana cigarette, officer, to a tobacco cigarette, for example?
yes, ma'am, a tobacco cigarette is usually machine rolled, white, has kind of a uniform burn to it, is usually concentric all the way through from the beginning to the end. It's the same diameter around, circumference all the way from start to finish. And a marijuana cigarette usually, because they're not machine rolled, they usually don't yield that same appearance. They're a little bit, like I said, more lumpy, sometimes tapered on the end. They don't burn as regularly looking as a tobacco cigarette.
Now, when you were speaking with Mr. Hasibi, he asked you, or you answered that, yes, people can hand-roll tobacco cigarettes.
Yes, ma'am.
Do hand-rolled tobacco cigarettes look different from hand-rolled marijuana cigarettes?
Well, like I said, it depends on the experience of the person that rolled it, you know. They can, I mean, but they can look similar as well.
Can you describe the way a person might smoke a marijuana cigarette?
Yes, ma'am. Usually marijuana smokers will take it, you know, and do like that.
Can you please describe to the court what you just did, officer?
Yes, ma'am. I held my thumb and index finger together, and I pretended like I had a marijuana cigarette in my hand, and then I would put it up, my thumb and index finger up to my lips, take a very long, deep inhalation, retain it in my lungs for a little bit of time, and then exhale.
Based on your experience, is that the way that a tobacco smoker normally holds a cigarette?
Not normally.
How would a tobacco smoker normally hold a cigarette?
Usually it's kind of like this right here.
And could you describe that to the court?
Yes, ma'am. Usually tobacco cigarettes are held between the index finger and middle finger.
Now, you just stated that marijuana smokers usually have a long, deep inhalation.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain why?
Yes, ma'am. Marijuana is substantially more expensive than cigarette tobacco smoke, and marijuana carries an active ingredient in it called tetrahydrocannabinol. It's THC. That's the active ingredient. It is carried through the smoke of the marijuana. So the deeper an individual will inhale the smoke into their lungs, and the longer they retain it in their lungs, will yield stronger results from the active ingredient. The alveoli and the lung sac absorb the smoke and put it into the bloodstream, the active ingredient THC.
Based on your experience, do tobacco cigarette smokers take the same method of drags, or do they smoke differently?
No, ma'am. Usually it's they smoke differently. Usually it's a much more shallow smoke. It's usually not held in the lungs for any extended period of time.
Is that true for a hand-rolled tobacco cigarette as well as a manufactured cigarette?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, normally people don't, you know, take as deep an inhalation on any kind of a tobacco cigarette, machine or hand-rolled, as they do a marijuana cigarette.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about your observations surrounding the defendant's arrest. Now, what were you doing on January 6, 2001 at approximately 1:40 in the afternoon?
I was on routine patrol southbound in the 1500 block of Guadalupe.
Now, the 1500 block of Guadalupe, is that a two-way street or a one-way street at that point?
It's a one-way street at that point, ma'am.
And when did you first see the defendant?
We were about in the middle of the block, and the light had just turned yellow at the intersection of 15th and Guadalupe, and I knew it was fixing to turn red. So I started slowing down, and as I was slowing down, the individual entered my peripheral vision, and that's when I first saw her.
Now, where were you did you stop at the light?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Where were you positioned in regards to the defendant at the light?
I was the second vehicle in my lane. I was somewhat at about a 45 to 60 degree angle from her horizontal position.
Now, Mr. Hasibi asked you if the windows were tinted.
Yes, ma'am, they were.
Could you see through the windows?
Yes, ma'am, I could.
Were they lightly tinted, darkly tinted?
Well, they were in compliance with state law. They have a little sticker on the side. They were, I believe they have to let in 80% ultraviolet rays.
So what did you see the defendant doing in her car from your position?
She was smoking a joint.
Could you please describe that in a little bit more detail?
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, she would do this number.
And could you describe that to the court, what you just did with your hands, officer?
Yes, ma'am. I held it with my thumb and index finger and put it to my lips. Inhaled deeply.
And when you, so if we could just take a step back for a moment and break that down, officer. When you first saw her, she was taking a drag from a joint, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you believe it was a joint?
It was the appearance of the cigarette, the way she was holding it, and the way she was smoking it.
And could you please describe the appearance of the cigarette?
Yes, ma'am, and it appeared to be self-rolled. It was a little bit wrinkly, a little bit lumpy. It was tapered on one end, and it had somewhat of an irregular burn on the other end.
And did this appear, did this appear at all like a tobacco hand-rolled cigarette?
When you say it all, I suppose it did appear somewhat like a tobacco cigarette, but it just had some characteristics that were more indicative of marijuana.
Now, once you saw the defendant in the car, after you'd seen her smoking the joint in the window, what did you do next, if anything?
I surveilled her there at the red light until the red light turned green.
And after you, could you please explain surveil to the
That just
board?
means keep an eye out on. I mean, I was just sitting there watching her.
And then did you take any steps towards approaching Ms. Austin?
Yes, ma'am, I
defendant?
did.
Could you please explain to the court what you did?
Well, when the light turned green, I decided that I'd seen enough, and so I pulled behind her, activated my overheads. She pulled over, and I exited my vehicle, approached her vehicle, and I identified her.
Now, when you approached her vehicle, were the windows rolled up or rolled down?
They were rolled up. Her windows were rolled up.
At what point did you ask her to roll down her window?
As I was approaching, I kind of did a little hand motion like that and just, had her roll it down.
When she rolled down the window, did you notice anything out of the ordinary?
She had a passenger in the car with her.
Was there, did you see any more evidence to lead you to believe that she was smoking marijuana?
Her eyes appeared a little bit bloodshot and watery.
Did you smell anything?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what did you smell?
I smelled the burning odor of marijuana cigarette.
And based on your experience, are you familiar with the burning odor of a marijuana cigarette?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what did you do, if anything, after smelling the marijuana?
After smelling the marijuana, I asked the subjects to identify themselves. Both of them did. They produced their driver's licenses. I then asked them to step out of the vehicle. I frisked them for weapons. They didn't have any. I put them behind the vehicle for my safety, and then I searched the vehicle.
Did you find anything from that search?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what did you find?
I found a bag of weed and a roach.
When you say roach, what do you mean?
The burnt end or the residual end of a marijuana cigarette.
And you said you found a bag of weed?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you please describe?
Yes, ma'am. It was a sandwich bag that contained 19.5 grams of green leafy substance, which I later determined conclusively that it was indeed marijuana.
And did you arrest the defendant?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Pass the witness.
Just a couple questions real quickly. Officer Sheffield, you mentioned earlier when I was questioning you that you were 6 to 8 feet away from Ms. Austin's car.
Well, I guess our car doors were about 6 to 8 feet apart. I could have been a couple feet, a little bit further.
In fact, you were, let's talk about her car. She was the first car at the red light.
Yes, sir.
You were one car to the left and one car back.
Correct, sir.
Okay. And so it would be fair to say that you were at least the distance of one car length away from her, if not more.
At the red light, yes, sir, I sure was.
And your car is what kind of car?
It's a Crown Victoria, Ford Crown Victoria.
It's a large sedan type vehicle, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it's a four-door sedan.
And her car is a two-door Camaro.
It's a two-door sports coupe, yes, sir.
It's a sports coupe, but it's a pretty long car. I mean, it's not one of the smaller economy type Japanese vehicles, is it?
Well, I'd say it's a mid-sized car.
It's a mid-sized car. So from her location, meaning her personally in her driver's seat, to you in your driver's seat must have been at least one car length.
Objection, Your Honor, just repetitive. I feel like we've covered this ground over and over. He's asked the same question 3 times.
I'm going to go ahead and allow it.
Well, I see what you're saying. At that point, we were not 6 to 8 feet apart. We were at least a car length. I was at least a car length behind her, and still that 6 to 8 feet of lateral space between us.
Okay, so it was more than 6 to 8 feet. If we were to measure, take a tape measure, say, that time and measure from you, where you were sitting in your driver's seat, to where she was in her driver's seat.
Well, it's about as far from here to there.
Is that 6 to 8 feet, officer?
No, sir, it's a little bit further than that.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
State, have any more questions of this witness?
No, Your Honor, may the witness be excused.
You're excused, officer. Thank you very much. Is there any more evidence on the motion?
No further evidence, Your Honor.
Okay. Does the defense have any argument on the motion?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to take the court's time just for a few minutes and give some legal argument. Your Honor, the legality of Officer Sheffield's stop that day on January 6th of this year of Ms. Austin's vehicle and Ms. Austin herself depends on whether or not Officer Sheffield had the adequate amount of reasonable suspicion. And I'm certain that that's not a foreign term to this court. There are two cases, actually 3 cases, Your Honor. May I approach the bench? Sure. I've got a copy of the 3 cases. There's 2 cases in 1997, the Woods case and the Davis case. And then the 1977 case, the Amarella case. And those cases generally clarify for us what is required to have adequate suspicion for a police officer prior to making a stop. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in those cases has told us that the totality of the circumstances must be examined. And once considering those totality of the circumstances, an objective test must be applied to those circumstances to make the determination of whether or not there was reasonable suspicion. That test is in 2 parts. The first part being, did the officer articulate specific facts leading up to the stop? That's part number 1. Part number 2, from those facts, can a rational objective inference of reasonable suspicion be concluded that the person arrested was at the time, was in the past, or was going to be in the future involved in any kind of wrongdoing or crime? As to the first part of the test, asking whether or not the officer who made the stop can articulate specific facts, we turn to Officer Sheffield's testimony here today. We know that Officer Sheffield was mistaken about the distance from the car, first 6 to 8 feet, then maybe longer. We know that the windows were tinted in Ms. Austin's car. We know the windows were rolled up. And Officer Sheffield himself has told us that hand-rolled cigarettes and marijuana cigarettes are virtually identical. Yet, Officer Sheffield, on 2 separate occasions during his testimony, said that once he saw Ms. Austin sitting in the driver's seat, smoking something, immediately he said to himself, marijuana cigarette. The thought that that cigarette could be a tobacco cigarette never even crossed Officer Sheffield's mind. That, Your Honor, I submit to the court, is prima facie unreasonableness. And for Officer Sheffield to testify that after doing analysis he determined that it was marijuana cigarette,
that would further be unreasonable because of the circumstances, because of the tinted windows, because of the windows being rolled up, and the distance between the two individuals. Aside from that, there's no evidence that's been presented here today or in any of the documents related to this case that there was a traffic-related stop, meaning any erratic driving or any kind of traffic violation. The stop was strictly made because of what Officer Sheffield thought he saw. Further, it's clearly obvious from the testimony that Ms. Austin never tried to conceal whatever it was she was smoking. She wasn't using a roach clip, and she wasn't passing it back and forth to the passenger that Officer Sheffield saw. Those are indications that more than likely, or at least should tell someone that there's a good possibility that this is not a marijuana cigarette, that it's a normal cigarette. From all of these facts, from the testimony of Officer Sheffield, the second part of the test is that we have to decide whether or not a rational, objective inference of reasonable suspicion can be drawn from whatever we heard today, that Ms. Austin was in the past, was at that time, or was going to be in the future involved in some kind of a crime. And there is no reasonable conclusion that one can draw that that was the case. From what Officer Sheffield saw from his position in his patrol unit, there was inadequate reasonable suspicion, or in other words, unreasonable suspicion to pull Ms. Austin over. And for that reason, we ask that all of the evidence seized thereafter and all the statements made by Ms. Austin thereafter be suppressed.
Okay. I understand your position. I assume the state has a response.
Yes, Your Honor, may I approach?
Sure.
Your Honor, I believe I gave you both of the copies of the cases.
Okay.
Each was meant to give opposing counsel one. May I approach?
Sure.
Your Honor, I've highlighted 3 cases that I'll be discussing today. First, in 1968, the United States Supreme Court decided the standard for a reasonable stop under Chari v. Ohio. That standard is reasonable suspicion. The court articulated 2 prongs for reasonable suspicion. One, that the officer used specific and articulable facts, and 2, that those facts be objectively reasonable. Here we've heard from Officer Sheffield today, and he's listed all the specific and articulable facts that he based his stop on. He observed the defendant smoking a cigarette that had the appearance of a marijuana cigarette. It was hand-rolled. It was lumpy. The manner that she was smoking it was indicative of someone who smokes marijuana with their index finger and their thumb. She was taking long drags from that cigarette and keeping it inside her chest to keep the inhalation. He explained how, based on his experience as a police officer, marijuana smokers typically do this considering the expensive marijuana, and so the marijuana effects can take a deeper effect. Today, there's been no information elicited regarding Mr. Hasibi spoke regarding a stop, that there was absolutely no evidence that she was weaving in and out of lanes. Your Honor, also there's no evidence that he didn't elicit any evidence either way on that point. Additionally, Your Honor, we can look to Woods v. State. It's the second case, the Texas Criminal Appeals Court in '97, and Woods v. State also examined the totality of the circumstances test, and it's justified when the officer has specific articulable facts, as in Chari v. Ohio, and when taken together with rational inferences from which the facts will lead to conclude the person was about to engage in an illegal act. Based on Officer Sheffield's experience, again, his rational inferences based on the appearance of the cigarette, the manner in which she was smoking it, and her actions in the car, Your Honor. There's another case in the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, Amarillo v. State in 1997. This outlines an analogous case in which really defines what is reasonable suspicion. When is suspicion reasonable enough? It talks about, in this situation, a stop was upheld where two men were outside a Woolco store at night with the trunk open, and that alone was reasonable suspicion. The officer was justified in making that stop. In this case, Your Honor, we also have a second point, which is the legality of the search. As we know, the probable cause is the standard for the legality of a search of a vehicle. In this case, the officer had all of his observations before he made the stop. Again, the appearance of the cigarette, the manner in which she was smoking the cigarette. And in addition, when he arrived at the car, she unrolled the window. He also smelled the smell of marijuana, and based on his experience, is familiar with that smell. In addition, Your Honor, once the car was searched, a butt of a marijuana cigarette was found, as well as a marijuana bag, proving that there was in fact marijuana in the car, using that as a probable cause to arrest the defendant. Based on this case law, we ask that the court deny the motion to suppress.
All right. Does defense have anything to add?
No, Your Honor, nothing further.
Okay. I'd like to take this matter under advisement. Let's go ahead and set it on the pretrial docket for September 21st, and if you come back then, I'll give you my decision.
Why are you down the nuts, man? Why are you so gloomy?